What happens to your brain when you lie? 10 incredible facts. First fact: immediate activation of the alert system. When you lie, your brain instantly goes into a state of alert. The amygdala, a structure linked to threat detection, is activated because the brain interprets lying as a social risk. Even small lies require the brain to assess consequences, possible reactions from others, and future scenarios. This increases the level of neural arousal and prepares the body to respond quickly if the lie is questioned. The brain begins to operate in defensive mode, increasing attention, muscle tension, and speech control, as any inconsistency can expose the falsehood. This process occurs in fractions of a second and consumes significant mental energy, even when the person believes they are lying with ease. Second fact: action of the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is the center of planning, control, and decision-making. When lying, this region must work intensely to inhibit the truth and construct a coherent alternative narrative. The brain must remember what is true, suppress that information, and at the same time sustain the false version. This requires high cognitive multitasking, which explains why complex lies are more difficult to maintain over time. The bigger the lie, the greater the overload on this area, reducing the ability to concentrate and increasing the chance of behavioral errors, such as long pauses, confusing answers, or verbal inconsistencies. Third fact: increased brain energy expenditure. Lying consumes more energy than telling the truth. The brain needs to keep several pieces of information active simultaneously: reality, the lie, the expected reaction of the other person, and possible future corrections. This extra effort increases glucose and oxygen consumption in the frontal and temporal areas. Over time, repeated lying can lead to mental fatigue, irritability, and a decline in clarity of thought. Biologically, the brain prefers the truth because it requires less processing. Lying is always an artificial deviation that forces the neural system to work harder than necessary. Fourth fact: changes in memory. When you lie, your brain creates a parallel memory. This false memory may be recorded with fewer sensory details than a true memory, making it more unstable over time. In some cases, repeating the lie can cause the brain to start treating it as real, mixing true and false facts. This phenomenon explains why some people come to believe their own lies. The hippocampus, responsible for memory consolidation, needs to constantly reorganize information to sustain the created narrative. Fifth fact: involuntary physiological responses. Even when a person tries to control their behavior, the body reacts. Lying can cause microchanges in breathing, heart rate, sweating, and facial tension. These responses are controlled by the autonomic nervous system, which cannot be consciously controlled with complete accuracy. The brain understands lying as a potentially dangerous situation, which activates physiological responses similar to those of mild stress. That is why lying often causes physical discomfort, even when there is no conscious guilt. Sixth fact: impact on decision-making. When lying, the brain begins to make decisions based on artificial scenarios. This reduces the efficiency of judgment, as each new choice must consider maintaining the previous lie. This chain effect increases mental complexity and can lead to less rational decisions. The brain must constantly predict future reactions, which diminishes objectivity and increases the emotional burden involved. The longer the lie is maintained, the greater the risk of inconsistent or contradictory decisions. Seventh fact: neural adaptation to lying. If lying becomes frequent, the brain can adapt. Studies indicate that the initial emotional response tends to diminish with repetition, reducing amygdala activation. This does not mean an absence of impact, but rather a progressive desensitization. The brain learns that lying does not generate immediate consequences and begins to reduce the warning signal. This mechanism explains why some people lie more easily over time, even though the cognitive cost remains. Eighth fact: effects on self-control and empathy. Lying requires constant internal focus, which reduces the ability to perceive emotional cues from others. The brain prioritizes self-preservation of the false narrative, momentarily diminishing empathy. The anterior cingulate cortex, involved in emotional and social processing, may be less sensitive during the act of lying. This makes social interaction more mechanical and less emotionally connected. Fact 9. Cumulative stress. Maintaining lies over time creates a state of continuous vigilance. The brain remains alert to possible threats of exposure, which raises cortisol levels. This accumulated stress can affect sleep quality, memory, and mood. Even lies considered harmless require constant monitoring, which keeps the neural system in a state of prolonged alertness. Fact 10. Why the truth is neurologically simpler. From a cerebral point of view, the truth is the path of least resistance. It does not require the suppression of information or the creation of alternative scenarios. The brain functions more efficiently when it does not have to sustain artificial versions of reality. Therefore, telling the truth tends to generate less stress, greater mental clarity, and less cognitive strain over time. Want to see what else happens to your brain when you lie and other amazing things about your mind? Click on the links below.